¿Tú quieres cargarlo ahora?
Alan, you're there?
Hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm sorry, how are you doing?
Oh, Hashem, great.
Okay. I don't see you. I just see your name.
Yeah, because I'm in my room with my baby sleeping. So
No problem. Okay. So you get a private share today so far.
okay, so Haversa.
Yeah, that's Rusa. Okay, I guess we're recording now, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so we'll start. So I guess everybody else listen to the recording afterwards. So tonight we have a lot to cover. We want to basically just touch on some of the main points that we discussed in Hagalas Kalim, especially what will be in the Bechina. And we'll just, we're not going to go into too much in depth in anything. It's too much to do that. We obviously can't cover everything. We can't review everything that there is that we spoke about over many, many weeks. But I thought I'd touch on some of the main points as a quick Chazara. So first of all, the Makar for Hagalas Kalim, like Tfilas Kalim, and they're written together in the same psukim in Parshas Matos by the Melchemes Midian, by Clay Midian, that we learn over there that we learn the halacha of Tfilas Kalim, which is din deraisa, and we learn the halacha of Hagalas Kalim, which are also both din and deraisa. And we have in we'll talk more about this, but in Sif Beis, so we have that tells us the Seder of Devarim, although the psukim sort of sound otherwise, but the Seder of Devarim is first Hagala and afterwards Tefillah. And actually, from the pasuk is Rambam to that, the Gra points out that it says Ta'avira Be'esh, and then afterwards is V'tahera. The Ta'avira Be'esh is referring to the general halachas of Hagala, and then V'tahera is referring to the Tara that happens on the day, the mikvah. So we see that the Seder Dvarim is Hagala and afterwards Tefillah. Now the Rashba says, the name of the Rashbam, it's brought down in the Shach, that the reason for this is that to do the other way around, to do first Tefillah and then Hagala would be like Tovel. It would be Tovel v'sheretz biyado. You can't be Tovel in a mikvah with the sheretz that's matama you while you're holding it in your hand. So what's matama over here is the treif, the treif food, the goyim that cooked with it, and you take it and you're gonna put it in the mikvah with the treif still in it. Then it's Tovel v'sheretz biyado. The lashon of the Taz when he brings it down is nira ketov v'sheretz biyado, or mixi ketov v'sheretz biyado. That it looks like that, not that it's mashma that it's not really that, but it's looks like it. Because be'etzem, really in Svara, it's two separate things. The Maisa, if there would really be a lot of stuff there that a real chatzitza, that's one thing. But the way the Taz seems to learn if it's mixi is because we have two separate things going on. The Hagalas Kalim is because it's not kosher. The Tfilas Kalim has nothing to do with that being kosher. The Tfilas Kalim would be, even if you bought it from a goy brand new, you still told about the Kalim. It's because it's Yotzei Mirashus Akum and Nichnas L'Rishus Yisrael. In order to be elevated to the level of putting on a Sudas Yisrael on a holy table of a Jew, we need to have a Tfilas Kalim. So the being treif or not treif really has nothing to do with it. But from lashon of the Rashba itself and the Shach, it's mashma that is considered a chatzitza. So perhaps the fact that you have like the remnant of the ownership of the goyen, and the fact that it has that treif still in it, that's considered like a chatzitza for the Tara, for the kedusha as well. Now the Maisa, we have a Mechos Poskim that in the Ramah over here, and whether if you're hofech l'seder, if it's also tefillah or not, if you did the tefillah and afterwards the hagala, if it works or not. And halacha l'maisa, so the Shach says that we have to be tovel below bracha. Now the Dagam Ravava, it's also brought down in the Piskei Tshuva without any cholik. The Dagam Ravava says on the spot that this halacha is only true if it's the kli is a ben yama. The seder that's ma'akev, they have to have first hagala, then tefillah. It's only if it's a kli which is a ben yomo, which once it passes, it's not a ben yomo anymore. Then there's nothing left in the kli. It's considered nothing there, and then the seder is no longer ma'akev. And since the Piskei Tshuva brings it with that below cholik, and also the Aruch HaShulchan brings it, mashma that's the way they paskin. There are other poskim brought down by Chalkas Binyamin that are cholik on this and hold that it doesn't matter if it is a ben yoma or not. and he's machmer over there, even though it sounds like the Pesach Tshuva to be mekel. The Maisa, as soon as the kudas and achlos would be whether or not if Dagam Ravava to say that if it's not a binyomo, it's not ma'akev anymore, so he must be holding that it's really considered a chatzitza, and that's the reason that it's ma'akev, not just that like a some kind of a getter advarim, but it's a real chatzitza, and that's all kolzman that there's the real faith there. And once it passes and it's no longer a binyomo, then it's not considered there's anything in the kli, then it's no longer a ma'akev. And those that say that it is probably learn that it's just a gzeras akasav, and that has nothing to do with the fact that there's something not kosher there, because it's, like we said, it's two separate things according to the shitas. The tahara and the kashras are two separate things. But even so, the Torah is makbid on the seder, so then they hold that the seder is ma'akev, or at least there's a din l'chatchila in the seder, even if it's not a binyamo. But so we paskin though that if you would be mahapach the seder, it is kadai to be machmer l'chatchila, but if it's not a binyamo and you're mahapach the seder, you did first the tefillah and then you did the hagala, then it would not be ma'akev if it's not a binyamo, the b'diavad. Okay, so that's one nakuda here. The halacha of hagala, we said it's a din in the Torah, and we learn that from Klei Midin. That tells us that it's a din deraisa. So most poskim will learn, it's based on a Tosfos and a Rush, that most poskim will learn that this din hagala, which is deraisa, a chiyuv deraisa due to hagala, is only kolzman that the kli is a binyamo. For the same reason we just saw in the Dagam Ravava, that once it's no longer a binyamo, then there's no longer anything in that kli, and it's because we say that the Gemara says at the end of Avodah Zarah that once it passes 24 hours, or according to some Rishonim, it passes overnight, but we pass in 24 hours. So then the tam in the kli is pogum, and that tam that's pogum in the kli means that it's no longer the tam that the Torah asers. So in other words, even though you might have tam shel iser in a food that will last for days and days and days, but what's in the walls of a kli, like the Gemara says that any tam that's nichnas into a kli, it's iyashar lo mifkum porta. Immediately upon entry in the walls of the kli, it has a little bit of a weakening of the tam, or somewhat of a pagam in the tam already the minute it goes in. Once it goes over 24 hours just sitting in the walls of a kli, then it's no longer tam that the Torah asr, and therefore there's no chiyuv deraisa for hagalos kelim. And according to Rabbeinu Tam, according to Tosfos, he has to make a kimta that the entire parsha of Klei Midyan, that the Torah says that if you bushel the water, then you have to put it in boiling water, and if it's beish, then beish, etc. Is all talking about a kli ben yomo. It means if they want to immediately use the kli when they were menatseach the bnei midyan, they want to use those kelim immediately. Then there's a halacha of hagala or libun. But if it's past 24 hours, then the Torah wasn't speaking about that. That's according to Tosfos. That's based on the fact that we say that the taste is already nifgam in the walls of the kli. I think in the past we discussed that there is a Shitas Rashba that holds that the tam is actually not nifgam in the walls of the kli any more than it is when it first goes in. So the din tam nifgam after 24 hours is not in the walls of the kli. It's in the food that once it goes out of the walls of the kli into the food, that we say that it goes out in a way that's pogum. But in the walls of the kli itself, it stays tam as it always was. So according to the Rashba, we can understand, we don't have to make any akimtas. According to the Rashba, and Achronim say this in the Rashba, that the din hagala will remain a din deraisa even after it's a ben yamo. It's a tremendous nachmin al halacha, and it's really depends on this lumdus of what's going on in Tan Lefgam. That according to Tosfos, it becomes really pugum in the walls of the kli, and it's not considered anymore what's called roy leger as a fit for achila legabi its tam. And therefore it can't create the din of tam ki'ikr. The reason we ask food that was cooked in a pot that has bliyas in it, things that are absorbed in the walls, because of the din tam ki'ikr. We said the tam of the food is like the food itself. But that's a chiddush Torah, the din tam ki'ikr. And according to Tosfos, tam ki'ikr will only apply when it's tam toiv, when it's really good tam, and it remains tam in the walls of the kli. Afterwards, there's no din tam ki'ikr. According to the Rashba, what's in the walls of the kli still remains good. Just the din tam ki'ikr will be paka when it goes into the food because it doesn't go into the food in a way that it still tastes good. But the din hagala will remain a din deraisa according to the Rashba even after 24 hours. So the Maisa wrote Poskin like Tosis that it is already considered pogrom in the walls of the Kli, and therefore we take on that the din hagala is a din derabanan after 24 hours, although we still need to do it. Now the question remains, if it's tam pogrom and it will not ask for the food, the tam pogrom cannot ask for the food, being the Rashba, being the Tosis. So according to the Rashba, we understand the din hagala just because the Kli it's like exerts a kosav. As long as there's tray from the Kli, there's a din hagala. There's still tray from the walls of the Kli. But according to Tosis, in the walls of the Kli, there's not even tray anymore. Then why is there a din hagala b'chlal after 24 hours? So that the Gemara at the end of Avodah Zarah says because it's really an achanami mitzad what's in the walls. It's not a problem. That it's not going to aser. So it's not mitzad the cheftza of what's in the walls, but rather it's a din that if we allow you to use that Kli, you might come to use a Kli that is a ben yamo, atu ben yamo. Gzera ain't a ben yamo, atu ben yamo, the Gemara says in the end of Avodah Zarah. And therefore, it's really not a din mitzad the cheftza of the isra and the Klis. It's a din of the gavra in the person that he should not come to use a Kli which is a ben yamo. In the past, when we discussed this Lumdus, we spoke out of nafkamina, which is going to come up a couple times throughout Hagos Kalim. Nafkamina in that the Shulchan Aruch passes later on that there's a halacha that you go after rov tashmisho of the Kli, meaning when most of the use of the Kli is hagala, and even though a couple times you might have used the Kli ala eish, which would necessitate libun, we go after rov tashmisho. The Ramah is machmir, but the Mishnah Berurah says that B'shas Tzchak or B'diavad or Hefsid that we are Mekel, we can rely on the Mechaber, which we do many times with the Tzirufim, that we say that we do it, go after Rov Tashmisho. And we ask then, it's a big pella, how can you possibly go after Rov Tashmisho? Who cares what does it matter that usually it's used for Hagala if a couple times it was used by the higher level of Shimush and you should need to have used Aish to get out that Shimush B'Aish. So we said in the name of Moshe Feinstein that since the din of the whole din that we're allowing Rov Tashmisho is only if you're doing Hagala after 24 hours. And after 24 hours, it's already Tan Lefgam. So the whole reason that we're doing it is not a din mitzad the chefs of the walls. It's a din in the Gavra, that's what says Ramosha. It's only mitzad the Gavra that you shouldn't come to use a Kli that's a Ben Yomo. If we allowed the Ene Ben Yomo, the Zero Ene Ben Yomo, Atu Ben Yomo. So if the Gavra, we're worried that he might come to use the Kli as a Ben Yomo, what are we worried about? We're worried about he might use this Kli in the way it's usually used. We don't have to be worried that this Gavra might use the Kli in a way that's not ordinarily used. So mitzad, the din of the Gavra, it makes sense to go after Rov Tashmisho to say that our goes are on you not to use this Kli, that you might come to use it in a way that it's usually used. And therefore, we look at Rov Tashmisho to determine how the Kli is usually used, and that's the way we have to do Hagala in it with it after 24 hours in order to Mekayim that concern of Chazal that Zero Ata Binyamo, Ena Binyamo, Ata Binyamo. So it makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now in Sif Dalid, we have a halacha of a machbas, a frying pan. Machbas shemetagnin bo alpha pishal inin chamin bepesach dalab hagala inin shar isurim tzricha libun. There the Mechaber is paskening that it's enough for Pesach to do, if you would get a frying pan of Shari Surim, you would need to have a Libun Gomer because it's used directly on the Aish. But I'm sorry, not because it's used on the Aish, but because it's Shari Surim, you Isser Gomer, you need to come on to Libun. Mashenken, the Machbas over here is being used for Chametz. Now, Rav Poskin learned that the chiluk between Shari Surim and Chametz is because Chametz is the din of Heterabala. The chiluk between Machvas of a goy and Machvas of Pesach is Heterabala or Isurabala. And when it's Heterabala, then it's just like we learned by Basar B'Cholav that if basar, if a pot is nivel with basar, then you can always kasher it with Hagala because that's enough in order to prevent it to be chal on it the isser basar v'chalav, because the bisman that it was balea first with basar, then it's considered hetera bala. Right now it's heter. It might become basar v'chalav if you cook milk on it later, but if you weaken it to the point that it's very, very schwach, it's very weak, and it can no longer be chal the isser basar v'chalav on it. And who it did with chametz, it's hetera bala. So that's the case. That's the pshat in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shach does bring down another pshat between the Menach and Azaria, which is the Ramami Pano, that the chiluk is not. It's totally in. 1 second. He says the chiluk is by a goy. A goy usually uses a kli for. Let's say he's cooking oil in it, so there's nothing in between the pot and the oil. There's no water in between, so it's considered tashna shelo ayidei emtsoi. There's no emtsoi. There's nothing in the middle between the isser and the pot itself, and therefore it's always going to need libun. Masha inken by us, we're going to cook most of our food. If there's going to be anything that's usser, it's going to be through water. It's going to be an emtsoi. It's sort of an akimta. It's a very interesting kind of akimta, but the Maisa of the Taz doesn't even mention it. And we don't paskin that way. We paskin that the chiluk is between hetera bala and isura bala. That's the chiluk in the Shulchan Aruch. So it will come out then that the Shulchan Aruch is paskining that chametz is hetera bala. Now we have a stira between here, which we discussed this in the past, in the Taz and and Rabbi Kveger asked the stira. The Shulchan Aruch later on in Tafnan Aleph paskins that chametz is considered isura bala. So maybe a little bit later we'll discuss the stira and how we can answer the stira. But there seem to be a number of stiras in the Shulchan Aruch, how he views chametz, as chametz considered isser or heter, and the time that it's nivla. And as we discussed in the past shiurim, the yisod of this chakira depends on how you learn, how you compare it. The din of isser and heter bala was said to begin with in the Gemara and Avodah Zarah by noisar, by a korban that was nivla in the pot that it's being cooked in, and then later on that night, if it wasn't eaten, or the next morning, depending on which korban, then it becomes nosar, and that becomes isser. So b'shasa b'liya, then it was nivla into the pot. It was hetera bala. The korban was heter at that time. It only became isser later on. So the shame nosar was chal later on. When it was nivla on the korban, it had a different shame. It had in the pot. It had a shame korban, not a shame nosar. The shame nosar only came later on. So that's, according to some Rishonim, that the Isra chametz, even though chametz wasn't actually asr before Pesach, but it was called chametz, it still is chametz. So it's different. It's more chamor than a korban as far as the Isra and heter bala. That's machlokes, whether it's totally in the shame chametz or it's totally in the Isra chametz, whether it's considered heter or Isra bala. So we have, like we said, steers and Mechaber about this, and we'll talk about this maybe later on. Now, going a little further, the Ramah in Sif Beis, getting back to that a little bit, we skipped over. Excuse me 1 second. Excuse me. Okay, the Ramah in Sif Beis said a lashon that ein lahagil shum kli she'ena ben yama. It's a very strong lashon that we don't do any hagala at all on a kli that's not a ben yama. So the Taz asked the kasha already that he left out the halacha that if you have shishim kenegdo, then it's mutter. Why should we not be matbil a kli that's a ben yama? We're worried you might not have 60 against it. If it's in a ben yama, it's a real isser. So then we paskin that chanan chedichanas nevela, which means that all the water if you let's say take a kli that's cooked in chazar, and now you fill that up with water and you cook it. So all of that water, since it doesn't have 60 against its own pot, it's against itself. All the water itself becomes treif, becomes chazar, because of the sport, like we said before, that tam ke'ikra, that the tam goes into the water, it makes it all into a davar isser. So the whole issue is only if there's not 60, that's why you can't do it, because it's not 60, then the water itself becomes treif, then it treifs the pot also again. But the Ramah left out the halacha that it's mutter if there is shishim. So the poskim say that the Ramah is talking. The Taz of Kasha is mitzad din, but the Ramah is saying mitzad minhag because we're worried you're not going to have 60, excuse me. Then that's why there's a minhag, not mitzad iser, not mitzad halacha, but mitzad minhag, because we're concerned that might happen. Then that's why we're machmer to say that you should never do it, even if you have 60. Then mitzad minhag not to tovel it. Now, if there's b'shas tzarach gadol, and there's mamish a case of need or it's shas chak, then of course 60 is okay, and as well as there are other situations we'll talk about in a minute that even if you don't have 60, there are situations where we can be matred even if it is a ben yamu. But the lashon of shum kli, the Taz adds that even if it's a kli shel heter, like you want to kasher out a kli that's milchiks, to use it for fleishiks. And we have a different minhag not to do that, but if a person has a need to do that for some reason, then still the minhag is not to kasher it while it's a ben yamo. Even though a ben yamo of milk, let's say, does not create chanan, doesn't aser the water. Asering the water only happens when you use treif, not if you use something which is heter, like chalav or basar. But nevertheless, we say that we shouldn't kasher it while it's a ben yamo. The Knesset Agdola says that even though we can't kasher something with hagala when it's less than 60 or when it's not a ben yamo, that's only sort of hagala. But libun would be okay because libun doesn't involve any water, any other medium that you're using to kasher it out for that water to become aser. So the whole problem of not having 60 or being ben yamo is only if we're talking about libun, hagala, but not about libun. Libun is okay. Now we spoke about and we learned Tafna and Beis in Or Chaim, and this we discussed. It was one of the last questions of the B'chana also, but we brought in the name of the Chazon Ish and Rosh Zalman and Rabbi Yoshev as well that in the Shasat Chak there is an eitzah that if a person, the case with by the Chazon Ish was that they had chametz pots in an army base, and they needed to use those pots up until Erev Pesach, so they were within 24 hours, and we passed like the mechaber that it's Isur Abala, and even so, the Chazon Ish, there was a tzarach gadol, the army needed those pots for Pesach, so the Chazon Ish allowed them to kasher the pots as long as they put a lot of soap, a lot of dishwashing soap into the pots, in order that when the water came out, when you boil it up, any bliyas that come out are not going to aser the water and become chanan because the bliyas are going to become lifgam because the soap will be pogem, the tam that goes into the water. So that's an important idea that we can have different items which will be pogem a tam and therefore not allow it to aser to create an isser. And I know that so and Rabbi Yoshev and Rabbi Yoshev and Shlomo Zalman agree to that. Rabbi Moshe has a tshuva that he basically says you have to do it, always do hagala twice. So you do one cooking up in order to be pogam the tam in the pot, and then you do and once it's nifgam, then you do a second hagala in order to do the hagala with the tam nifgam. So you basically turn it into a matzah of idea the first bishul, you turn it into a matzah. It's ki'ilu like with after 24 hours, the whole thing became lifgam within the walls, and then you do it again. And the others, the Chazon Ish didn't seem to specify that, and might not even have been time to do that Erev Pesach. And the svara those posts we're going with, which seems to be that that's sufficient of a svara, would be that you don't have a need to pogim the tam and the walls as long as you are pogim the tam and the water, and then the water worked as hagala. But L'maiser Moshe is machmer to do it twice, and others mentioned as well. So that seems to be the industry standard. That if this ever comes up, like in a hotel situation, where they need to they have a shasat chak, that they always try in the industry to make sure that the kelim are not bnei yaman when they kasher out a hotel to use for a chasana or whatever. But sometimes things happen and go wrong, and they have a lot of the main kelim they need to use, or some of them might have been used inadvertently, or they didn't. They slipped through the system. They were used within 24 hours. So in that case, they will also first cook it boil it up in a pogem, and then afterwards do a real hagala. There are those that hold that if there's a lot of soap in the water, then it's considered like a different mashke, which that we saw in Shulchan Aruch. Chatchila shouldn't be do hagala with a different mashke other than water. Recently somebody spoke in a convention that it seems that the pogem of choice to put into the water is ammonia, which is totally pogem of the time, as opposed to just soap like they used in the time of the Chazon Ish. Okay, so now when we do kasher kli, so it's mentioned over here in Shulchan Aruch in the poskim that we need to always put the kli into a second kli to kasher it, not to kasher it within its own self. It's within 24 hours, it will never work to kasher it in its own water. If it's past 24 hours, it would, because after 24 hours, you're not going to asher the water anymore, so it just remains water. But within 24 hours, you can never kasher it, even if you need to kasher it within, you can't kasher it in its own water unless you use that pogim, because the reason being because you never have 60 in, the poskim say you never have 60 in the water inside of a kli against itself. There's always going to be less than 60 there, and therefore without a pogim, it's going to just asher the water and asher itself. Okay, moving on to Sif Vav. We had the halacha of cham mitzasa cham kulo. The Shulchan Aruch said that a metal kli, even though it was only used, some say that yesh omer mishim nishtamish bo iser b'mitzasa nesar kulo mishum cham mitzasa cham kulo. So the kli, if you use it with part of the kli with heat, then it extends throughout the entire kli. That's just for cham mitzasa cham kulo. He says that's l'gabe asring, but l'gabe hechsher is not going to be work. You can't just kasher that part that it went in, but you have to kasher the whole entire kli. And the Rama brought down that if you know if you only use part of the kli, then kabbalah kachpolta that you could kasher just that part of the kli. Okay, we don't have time to really go into this barichos, but the Taz is cholik on that Rama, and holds that even if you use only part of the kli, then you have to do hagala in the entire kli. We don't say kabbalah kachpolta legabe to schlep it out from the entire kli to get it back to only this part of the kli. But the shach, he's machriya like the Maram Mintz, that the pshat in cham mitzasa cham kulo only is if that halacha is only if you heated up one side and then it fell onto the other side of the kli. Like you heated up one side of the kli, cham mitzasa, and then the isser fell onto the other side of the kli, that it spreads out. But you say then it will asher the other end of the kli. But everyone agrees that if the isser fell on the hot part, it doesn't extend to the rest of the kli. It's only if you heated up one part, then the heat extends in order that the isser should be nivla into the other part of the kli, but not that it's going to extend throughout the entire kli. So according to the Maram Mintz and the Shach, then if you only use part of the kli, one side of the kli, then the other side doesn't need hagala. It's only that part. Not like the Ramah that it does extend, but you can't just kasher it. But it does not even extend to the rest of the kli, according to the Shach. So, but because many are cholik on that, so he says that's mutter only b'diavad. But there is for a b'diavad to be sovach on that. Now, but the Shach himself that holds like the Maram Mintz, which is a kula against the Ramah, that's only through bishul. But if it was through fire, alidei or, so then he says that after a kuli am lahol, everybody holds that it's mispashal b'kulo that does extend to the rest of the kli. So it comes out, but halacha l'maisa though that according to the Shach, it's b'diavad if you did hagala only if it only went in not through eish but through bliyas of hot water and one part of the kli, and you only kasher that part of the kli, and then you cook something, so then b'diavad is mutter. Okay, so those are some of the main points we talked about in Yeridei Kuf Chaf Aleph. A few points in Tafnun Aleph and Tafnun Beis and Orach Chaim, in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, in Hilchos Pesach. One thing we spoke about was in the halacha in Sifir Aleph of a machbas, that the Shulchan Aruch says in Sifir Aleph that a machvas, a frying pan, is enough to do hagala in it. So we brought down that the poskim today say that the machvas they spoke about, the frying pan in those days that was considered bishul, and all you needed is hagala. That's because they were talking about deep frying. They put a lot of oil and they were deep frying in the machvas. But today we have such a small amount of oil, then it's mavur in the Mishnah that if you have only just a little bid of oil, that it's nisraf and it's not considered a liquid, but rather it's considered like you're cooking directly on the fire. It's considered, which would necessitate libun, not hagala. So our frying pans would need libun, not hagala, and there's a huge nafkamina in that because our frying pans that are mostly Teflon coated or something similar to that. So then, since it's impossible to do libun, to get it red hot like it needs to be, and the Teflon to remain intact, it'll be destroyed. And so, therefore, there's no way to kosher if one of our today's frying pans become treif or especially kolshken to Pesach, which anyway Teflon you couldn't kosher. So there's no way to kosher a frying pan today because they need libun, and there's no way to do libun on it without destroying it. So you can just give it to the cleaning lady if that ever happens. Okay. And there's just an interesting Nekuda in Lumdis that the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkat and Chav Zayin, when he's talking about the halacha of doing libun with eish, with fire, he says it went in with fire, so kabolo kach polta. The way it went in, that's the way it goes out. So there's some poskim learn that it's literal, that the svora of kabolo kach polta, like we say the gabi hagala, the way it goes in, that's the way it goes out. That we see from the Mishnah Berurah that applies to libun as well. It's the same svora, just like the same way hagala works, libun works. But the Pri Megadim and Ramosha goes this way, and Tshuva says that's a mistake. That's not what the Mishnah Berurah really means. And the Pri Megadim obviously was before the Mishnah Berurah, but Ramosha, based on the Pri Megadim, says not like that. The Mishnah Berurah didn't really mean that. He's just borrowing the term kabbalah kapolta, but it didn't really mean technically that it works like hagala. Because hagala, the way hagala works when you boil it out, is you're sucking through the boiling process. You're sucking iser out of the walls of the kli into the water. That's what it means. That's what the word polto means. The way it went, the way it's soaked in, that's also the way literally it spits it out. So that svora applies only to hagala. However, libun is a whole different process. Libun is not taking it out of not coming to extract anything from the walls of the pot. Rather, it's just burning the isser exactly where it is. So it's a different process. And let's say one nafkamina. There are many nafkaminas in this lamdas, but Ramosha says a tremendous nafkamina that the halacha that we cannot do hagala on a kli cheres, on an earthenware vessel, because like the Gemara says that Torah he'ida al kli cheres she'enu yotze b'dof le'olam, the Torah testifies on a kli cheres that the fact is halacha that needs shvira, by the korbanos says you have to smash the kli, and rather than hagala, and it's talking about a kli cheres over there, that shows that you can never get it out of the walls. That says Ramosha, that's only through the process of hagala that you're coming to take it out of the walls. Masha'enken, if you do libun on it, you would put it back, let's say, into the kiln, right, into a kivshonos, or you do real libun on it. So then, even though it can't suck it out of the walls, but it destroys it where it is in the walls. It turns it into afar, and therefore, even a klicheres will be mutter that way through libun. That's a big nafkamina in how to interpret the words of the Mishnah Berurah to tell us you could even do libun on a klicheres. Okay, so now, as we mentioned before, that there's machlokas and there's a shaila whether or not chametz is hetera bala or isura bala. Getting back to that shaila, so that's actually a machlokas, the Mechaber Ramah and Sif Daled, that the Mechaber says that kelim shenishtamshe behem aydei or gon shvudim askolos gatzaben tzrichin libun v'alibun hu ad sheyed mitzotzos yitazin mehem. Libun means you have to do it, libun gamor, till sparks are flying from it. The Ramah says, Agav yesh mekilin in nislabin kolkach shekash nisrafolav mivachutz. And he says that the minhag is like Svara Shana, like the first Svara is the minhag, but but Aliva de Hilchasa, there is room to make in a case of need, just to do a libun kal, which would be, he says here, till a straw will burn on it, which mibachutz, meaning that you heat it up enough on the outside that it'll burn on the outside. And there's a tremendous chiddush which based on a certain Magen Avram that Kreger speaks about this based on a Magen Avram, that if you would have, in a case just for libun kal, it would be enough to just get that you need to straw to burn out. That's only if it's hot on one side. But if it gets hot enough that on both sides of the kli, inside and outside, it's the yatsa lettuce bow. It's enough to pull your hand away from it, and that's enough to be considered libun kal. It's a tremendous chiddush. Shlomo Zalman says that you can be samach on this kula, and if you have other tzirufim or other reasons to be mekel, we consider that libun kal. But the Mishnah Berurah speaks out over here in Chavches that the nekudas machlokas between the Mechaber and the Shita and the Ramah is whether or not chametz is considered. If it's isur bala, it's a real isur, then you need to do real libun. If it's heter bala, in order to stop this heter from becoming chametz, because it's really heter now, then that's why it's enough to have libun kal. So that's the nekudas machlokas in Mechaber Ramah. And as I mentioned, there's a stira in the Mechaber that here he's paskening that chametz is. I'm sorry, the chametz is considered it's isur bala. We mentioned that in Kuf Chaf Halef in Yeridea, and also later on in Tafnin Beis, the Mechaber holds that chametz seems to hold it's heter bala, because there the Mechaber says that you could do chametz within 24 hours, even though you use the chametz within 24 hours. Let's say you cooked chametz in a pot within 24 hours of the Shach HaMishis, 5th hour of Erev Pesach. As long as it's kodem Shach HaMishis, you can still do hagala on that pot, and by do the hagala by just putting water in it and boiling it out. So we're treating it over there as heter bala. And here the Mechaber clearly holds that it's isur bala, not like the Ramah. So that's the stira that the Taz and the Rebbe Kiveger point out. The Chazon Ish, as we mentioned, holds that the chiluk is as follows: that over here in Tafnin Aleph, that it was used al ha'esh. You actually used chametz with blia gemura on the fire. So then, since it is isur bala, he holds that it is isur bala. Therefore, it needs a real. It needs to have a real, since it has real tam, then it also needs a real hechsher, the way it was used. Masha'enken over there, that if it was boiled, if the chametz was boiled in the pot, so the way that the tam went into the walls of the pot is really not bar nat. We're discussing a case of nosin tam bar nosin tam, that it goes into the water for the water into the walls of the pot. So it's two timing removed from the actual chametz itself, and being that the case, it's a weak tam to begin with, so it's very easy to prevent that tam, that weak level of tam, to ever become an isur chametz from Pesach Haminin by doing hagala, even though it's within 24 hours. So the chiluk is not whether the Mechaber holds isur bala. It is isur bala, but it's a type of isur that has a shame isur, but it's not quite asur yet. And therefore, if you can weaken the tam enough that it shouldn't be chal isur, then the Mechaber is maskim that it's okay, and that's why it's not a stira in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. A few more points here. Okay, we had a discussion about whether or not dentures, false teeth, dentures, and these, if they need to be kashered, if they were used for chametz, if they need to do kasher for Pesach. We're not going to go back into it again. We had a tremendous machlokas of poskim about that. The Maisa, since they will be ruined, a lot of them will be ruined if you do hagala with them. So most poskim are makel to say that they're mitzvah without hagala. since one of the reasons is that it's always going to be past 24 hours, and also that it was never used but through a kli rishon to begin with. Nobody eats when they chew. Nobody chews with something so hot as a kli rishon. So if it was only to get a kli sheni or less, then it probably didn't absorb to begin with. And there's another svara as well, is that the juices, whatever, in the person's mouth also cause a tam nefgam. So, but if somebody did eat a davar gush shel Pesach, shel chametz, I mean, within 24 hours of Pesach, so then, or even, outside of 24 hours, but it was davar gush, which as long as it's yatz lettuce bow and he ate it anyway, it would have such a it could possibly cause a bleed into the dentures. So Rosh Zalman and Rabbi Yosef suggest to drink some hot tea with your dentures on before the 5th hour on Erev Pesach, in order to to whatever extent you ate, Kabbalah Kach Polto, since it wouldn't be that hot when you ate it. Also, it's not that hot in order to get it out. So they suggest to sip on some hot tea on Erev Pesach if you know you did that. But b'diavad, if you didn't do that, then for sure we're samach on ikar din. Even if you ate davar charif, you ate onions and things like that with your dentures on Pesach, there's no makom l'hachmer, it's mutter. Okay, we spoke about also the chiluk between heter bal and isur. Between davar yavesh that's needs libun if it's cooked on the fire, or if it was boiled on the fire, that is considered bishul. So Mishnah Berurah Sifkat and Samach Gimel speaks about if you have a type of food that starts off with liquid and then it stayed on the fire so long that it boiled out and it dried up. So now you have a situation where it started off as a liquid on the fire, but now the liquid is gone. So the Mishnah Berurah says, even so, it's still enough to do Hagolah on it, because we assume that there's still some lachluchis, there's still some bit of moisture left there, that it didn't totally lose its nature of being a davar lach. So it might not be a lot, and that wouldn't be enough to begin with to be considered a wet thing. But since it started off that way, it retains its nature of being a davar lach, and therefore it only needs hagala, not libun. Rabbi Yosef, we spoke about, had a chomer that if something a kli which starts off lach, but its derech is always to dry up, such as in the Yerushalmi kugel in Eretz Yisrael, that they have these huge pots and they start off with there's a lot of oil and stuff in it, but then it always dries out and becomes the kugel. So he says that's the derech to always dry up. Then that would need that could even need libun and wouldn't be enough to do hagala. Microwaves, also spoke at length about that. A big tremendous machlokas. Basically, according to Rabbi Yashiv, you really could never kasher for Pesach. There's too much. What you have to do according to Rabbi Yashiv makes it almost impossible to really kasher a microwave. Very, very difficult. But Ramosha is very mikol. Ramosha holds that if you take a cup of or some say 2 cups or a cup of water and put it in there and boil and leave it on until it boils out. Once you've cleaned it out first, and then you boil it out completely. So then we say also Kabbalah Kachpolto that it's able to kasher out the walls of the microwave, and even for Pesach. Glass, we have the machlokas in Sif Chavav, which according to the Mechaber, glass doesn't absorb at all, and it's mutter for if you cook treif in it or you cook chametz in it, it's mutter for Pesach, because glass does not absorb. It's called shia. Things slide off of it rather than absorbing in it. And you can switch back and forth, nochs to flesheks, whatever. Then we're going to the Ramah holds that the Ramah's been machmer that they kli schuchis, that glass vessels have a din of a kli cheres. And the pasuk would say that since it started off to begin with as a type of cheres, it started off as the sand and the beach, or wherever they got the sand from, and they created it, they turned it into glass. It has a din of a kli cheres. So this is machlokas and chamarma. It's a machlokas. It's a difference in the minhag Ashkenaz and the minhag Sfard till today. The Sfardim are very mikol using glass. Even many use it from the year till Pesach and from the rest of the year till Pesach and from Milchus to Fleshiks. And the Ashkenaz are much more machmir. And the Maisa Rov Rishonim do hold like the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah is really a chumrah, but the sugya, the Rishonim, really is like the Shulchan Aruch, that it's Shia is not Bolea. So for that reason, the Mishnah Berurah says the Pidyevid were samach on for sure we can be samach on rov tashmisho. But if you need to use a kli, let's say you want to use a kli, or you use the kli already, and rov tashmisho, let's say al yedei bishul, the Shulchan Aruch says not to, the Ramah says not to rely on that, but the combination of rov tashmisho and kli zchuchis, which rov poskim hold that's mutter as well, and rov poskim hold you can go by rov tashmisho. There's certainly room to make all by glass. And even so, the minhag Ashkenaz is not to use it for Pesach. For that reason, we say also that, again, Malcolm Hesed Meruba, if it's a case of great loss, like you cook food that's, then even if you didn't have you didn't have other stores like Rov Tashmisho, but you just had, since the Pri Chadash holds that the Pri Chadash, which is one of the Gedolei Poskim, Paskins Legamre like the Shulchan Aruch, he's totally not against the Ramah. So therefore, Malcolm Hesed Meruba, we do have certainly who to rely upon for sure for after 24 hours, even for Ashkenazim. And lastly, the question of a plastic. If we hold that we can kasher plastic for the rest of the year. So we can kasher from treif to kosher, or from from milchus to fleishus, whatever. If there's a reason to do so, there's strong reason to do that. But we do not kasher for plastic from the rest of the year till Pesach. Okay, so that covers a lot of the main points. Halacha l'maisa. Like we said, there's much more, but we'll suffice with that as a short Chazara. And Mr. Shem will be able to finish off. And I'm looking very forward to seeing everybody just a couple weeks away for the very exciting celebration. And so I'm hoping everybody can get the bechinas in and we can finish up and be able to, I would like very much, I spoke to her the talk today, I would like to very much to find an hour that we can all sit together and talk either before or after the event. Probably ideally before the event, because after the event it's going to be late and things are going on. But to try to have some meeting, we'll try to schedule something either before or after to talk about how we should proceed in the next limud, and once we finish up this and finish the event, Mr. Shem, Shatov and Slachas. Kol Tuv, and see everybody soon.